What's up, YouTube? It's Angel from Fit with Angel. When we talk about project management, physical fitness, career progression, and what you can do to level up in this life. We're diving into a topic that affects everyone: financial health. We're breaking down credit, savings, and how different generations handle their money, plus the hidden traps of high credit utilization. So grab the coffee, sit back, let's get into it. So, part one: credit limits by generations. First off, let's talk about credit limits. Did you know that your age might determine how much credit you have access to? I know, groundbreaking, I'm sure. But coming back to the subject and being serious about it, let's talk about this breakdown and how it actually is shown between the generations. So we're going to start off with Gen Z, the youngest cohort, has an average credit limit of around $13,000. Millennials, they are bumped up to about 28,000. Gen X takes the cake for basically every generation, 38 to about 39,000, and baby boomers aren't far behind with 42,000 altogether. And what's going on here? It's not just about the age, it's about the experience. Older generations have longer credit histories and often higher incomes that come along with it, which lenders love. But that doesn't mean young folks can't play the same game if done smartly. Let's dive into the next subject, which is the emergency savings part by generation. Now, looking at the savings, specifically emergency funds, the stats are a little concerning. If you look at the Gen Z, over 30%, and millennials, over 30% have less than 1,000 saved. Gen X, slightly a little bit better at 27%, but still it's a little over a quarter of their population. And then baby boomers, only 20% have savings under 1,000. But here's the kicker. The median emergency savings for middle class Americans is around 8,000. So if you're feeling behind, know that you're not alone and there's room to grow. Now, another portion of this that I wanted to break into a little bit is some of the gender disparities, especially when it comes to credit and savings. Diving a little bit deeper into that. Question now is, how do these gender dynamics come into play? Research shows that men typically have higher credit limits than women, even with factors like income, credit scores, as well as their baseline pay for each generation are equal. Why? It's partially a system of bias, something that has been building since you were allowed to not only have their own checking savings as well as financial stability outside of marriage. This is still relatively new when you start taking into consideration how much longer men had to actually build that side. So there's a little bit of biases, and comes back to lenders and how they assess the risk for each gender, or at least each person, right? When it comes to emergency savings, though, which is a little bit variant, women also tend to save a little bit less than men. And this could be for many reasons, not necessarily because there's a gender pay gap. There is a couple of things that may lend towards that, but it's not necessarily what I would say the primary reason why there is a difference in that. And this is why I state, advocate for yourself. Ensure that you are getting paid according to your value, but do understand that your value is going to be seen by the market depending on what you do. Work accordingly, get the most that you can. Remember, closed mouths don't get fed. You need to be able to voice and be an advocate for yourself. So, coming back to the other impacts, especially when it comes to average wages, let's go and break it down further into those cohorts, especially the generations, and see what's the averages, right? So with Gen Z, they earn about 32,000, right? Millennials, it bumps up to about 58,000. Gen X, which leads the pack because we're like in our prime years at this point, we lead with a median of about 65,000 or average of about 65,000. With baby boomers, because they're already on the downward slope, even the most youngest of them at 56,000. Higher income usually means higher credit limits, and that's the ratio correlation, right? Which makes sense. But here's the trap. Higher limits often lead to higher spending and lifestyle creep and stuff of that nature. Before you even know it, the utilization ratio between how much you make and what you're utilizing in credit starts to really creep up and become unbalanced, unfortunately. So let's go over what I mean by those credit utilization and the dangers of going over the golden mark, which is 30%. This is what banks utilize to ensure that if you're going to be considered into any particular category, it's going to be based on that history as well as your utilization in comparison to what you owe. Yes, they're not going to tell you that, right? This does play a role to include your employment and how much you make annually, right? So let's dive a little bit more deeper into this, right? So talking about credit utilization in particular, one of the most important factors in your credit score is the percentage of available credit that you're actually using. And what is the golden rule? Keep it below 30%. Here's why. If your utilization goes above 30%, it signals to lenders that you might be overextended, especially when you start thinking about what I just talked about with average income, right? Especially if this continues to become a pattern in your life, because unfortunately, as soon as you get access to your own credit score, you start to develop a pattern for how you spend, how your payments are going, and whether you're making your payments on time or are you missing it from time to time, right? These overextensions can drop your credit score, increase your interest rates, make it harder for you to borrow when you need it, et cetera, et cetera. It has ramifications, right? For example, if you're a millennial with about 28,000 in credit, this is your credit limit, 28,000, and you're currently utilizing 10,000 as your balance, right? This is what you owe. This is what you've used. Then your utilization is about 36%. That's a red flag, right? But don't worry, I got some strategies to help you fix that. So now to round this out, it's all about the actionable tips at this moment, right? What can you do? What can make this a little bit easier, especially when it comes to you utilizing your credit? So we're going to go over a couple of tips that I will say that I've utilized in the past, a couple of them that I don't fully recommend, but I want to give it to you as an option because of the fact that even though I may not fully recommend it, that doesn't mean that it may not be a viable option for you. Let's go over it, right? One of the main things I would say is monitor your spending, right? Monitoring your spending does, especially when it comes to utilizing your credit cards, your utilization, ensuring that you're utilizing it in a way that won't be detrimental and you're paying it off within a quick, fast way of going about things, right? Now, as stated, this is probably one of the best one right there because it does help you step your own process for one payments and ensure that you don't overextend yourself. Right? Next one, pay more than the minimum, right? The minimum is just paying interest. You got to get that through your head, right? Because it took me a long time to fully understand, especially in my early teens to my 20s, that when you only pay the minimum, you're only paying the interest. You're not really paying the balance, right? You're just ensuring you stay off the naughty list of not paying at all. That's what that interest really is, because for everything that is borrowed, there's interest on top of that. So if you're paying only the minimum, you're only paying the interest for the utilization. You're not taking care of the balance. And it only gets bigger and bigger as you continue to progress with the amount from month to month. So don't delay. Okay. Next one is going to be requested credit limit. Now, This one is the ones I was talking about, where I would say there is a balancing right here, right? Because yes, could you request a credit limit increase? Sure, as long as you meet the proper criteria for getting the credit and request increase, which means that, okay, you have to ensure that one, you're paying the bills on time, right? Two, you don't have any negatives according to that particular card services and your profile that says that you are either considered a risk or overextend yourself, and the balance on your card or the one that you're requesting the credit limit increase for is less than 30% and it's consistently less than 30%. Because all these patterns come into play, right? Now, if you do request that credit limit increase and you get approved, you will remember, does this change the ratio of credit limit available as well as what is being utilized? So your utilization looks a lot lower. Yes, it does change that ratio, but you still owe that money. There's no change in that factor. And if you don't already have a plan to ensure that you're paying on that in particular, you're only going to fall into the same issue, same trap, and the same ratio is going to come back again, primarily because you never had a plan to pay it off in the first place. I would not fully recommend this because it's almost like you're fooling yourself to believe that your ratio or how you're paying off on this is going well and dandy, when really all you did was create a bigger buffer so that your credit doesn't take a ding or the ratio looks better. So I say that with caution so that when you understand some of the limitations around that particular tip and why I don't fully endorse it, but provide that as a means for you to viably take upon yourself and make the decision whether that's a good plan or not. All right. Next one is build emergency savings, right? I can tell you right now, I know it's tough and I know that you're having some difficult and hard times, but I promise you, most people often have more money than they think, or at least on their hand, when it comes to this portion of it, right? And this is what I used to do on a weekly basis, right? Let's say I get paid every 2 weeks. And for every 2 weeks that I get paid, I remove about close to 10% of whatever my pay is. Then I divide it by 2 because you have to account for the 2 weeks that you worked, right? What I would do is that I will put up that same amount every week without fail, because I know once I get paid, I'm already going to pull that 10% anyway. So it doesn't make any sense not to just put it up somewhere else. And by somewhere else in savings. Now, the only caveat I would say to having an emergency saving, if you can be approved for this or qualify this, do it in a high yield savings account. Because with a high yield savings account, at least that money is continuing to grow. You're gaining a specific percentage instead of your traditional banks that they do 0.02%, right? What money is that making? They ain't making nobody money. If anything, it's making the banks money because now they can utilize that money that you just deposited in there for their own investments, making buku money back on from their ROI from investing in it and only giving you back exactly what you gave in. Take it from me. High yield savings accounts. Okay? High yield savings and checking account. Anything high yield that will at least give you some percentage back for what you have in there. Okay, this is why you want to build up, or this is where you want to build up your emergency savings. Now, one little caveat towards this. If you are going to do that with a high yield savings or high yield checking, ensure that it is something that you could get a debit card from or an institution where if you need to transfer it to your traditional bank, you can do it quick, fast, in a hurry within 24 hours or less. Okay, because I know that this is what we call an emergency fund. So that means it should be readily available at any given point. I personally like Wealthfront because they actually do send you a debit card and their percentages are really good, at least for the current market. But I'll leave a link down below so you can get some information on that. And I will put out the disclaimer, that link, if you do decide to go with, will provide me a 0.5% me on my side. And if you send this to another friend for recommendation, they'll do the same for you. But there's my disclaimer out there. All right. Now, the last but not least, but I will say my least favorite. But like I said, I am trying to be unbiased about what options are available for you so that you have full knowledge of what is available for you to utilize if it fits your scenario, right? The last one is going to be spread expenses across cards, right? So let's say you have more than one card. You have a couple of cards and stuff like that. Good high, you got utilization pretty low and stuff like that. If you're using one initial card that has a capability for balance transfers or even utilizing it across the board, just switching off on those cards. So one, you're not hitting that 30% utilization for any of the cards, then this may be a viable tactic just to ensure that you're having better financial outlook, especially when it comes to ratio utilization, right? But my only caution against this is that it goes back to the same reason why what I stated about number 3, which was requested credit limit increase, right? You need to ensure that you have a plan to pay it off, okay? Especially when you're spreading it across cards. And you need to have it in a way that you can access it quickly. You can remember that, hey, this is what you're going to, pay off on. My quick tip towards that, let's say you have 4, right? Make sure you set up your automatic payments, especially for those cards, at least at the minimum, at the least, right? And then you can go to a variable maximum. I normally set my cards up for at least anywhere between $180 to $200 just to ensure that when the date for payment is due, it automatically pays it off regardless of whatever's in there. And again, below $200, it'll just pay that off so that I'm scot-free at this moment. But I got it automated, so I don't have to remember. I don't have to think about it. And I know that the money is going somewhere. But I also have this system in place because I utilize my cards instead of utilizing my debit, right? And the reason why I do that is because I know I'm going to pay them all off at the end of the month. So why not build my credit using my cards as if I was going to use my debit card and then continue to pay off at the end of the month, because that's the best way to go about it. It ensures that, one, you're only using what you need and you're not paying the banks more than you need to pay them. Okay, but that's my tactic. I'm not saying for you to do that. I'm not a financial advisor, nor am I a credit guru. It has worked for me in the past, and if you think that may work for you, then hey, all for it. I say go ahead and utilize that capability, right? Now, I leave it at that because I think those are really good tips, except for 3 and 5. Of course, I think that it's 50-50 depending on your situation, but that is up for you to decide. With that, remember, financial health isn't just about the numbers. It's about the strategy. Whether you're a Gen Zer just starting out, planning retirement, you can take control of your finances today. And as I always say, you either learn it or earn it, but most optimal is both. If you found this video helpful, please smash that like button, subscribe, share with someone who needs to hear this. I'll catch up with you next time. Peace. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on your notifications for weekly updates. Like, comment, and share. Check out my other videos on professional growth and project management to take your skills to the next level.